Hello, we are so excited to show you our native speech capabilities. Welcome back to the English journey. Today, we are exploring a very serious but beautiful topic: how to stop wasting your life and start making every second count. My name is Anna, and I am here to guide you through how to live with intention.
And I am Abel. I am so glad to be here with you, Anna. We often live as if we have an infinite amount of time, but the truth is that time is our most precious resource. Today, we want to help you use English to find your focus and stop letting your best years slip away.
So let us begin with something that I think about almost every morning. When I wake up, before I even reach for my phone, I try to sit quietly for just 1 minute and remind myself of something very simple, but also very powerful. I remind myself that today is the only day that actually exists. Yesterday is already gone. It is a memory. Tomorrow is not guaranteed to anyone. It is only a plan, a hope, a possibility. The only place where life is actually happening is right now, in this very moment.
That is something I really struggle with, Anna. I spend so much of my mental energy either replaying things that have already happened or worrying about things that have not happened yet. Last week, for example, I spent almost an entire afternoon feeling anxious about a presentation I had to give the following Monday. Instead of using that afternoon to prepare or to rest or to enjoy something I love, I just sat there feeling nervous and unproductive. When Monday finally came, the presentation went fine. All that worry was completely wasted energy.
And that story is so incredibly common, Abel. You're definitely not alone in that. The human mind has a very natural tendency to travel away from the present moment. Psychologists call this mind wandering, and research has shown that people spend nearly half of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they are currently doing. Half. That's an extraordinary amount of time. And the research also shows that when our minds are wandering, we're generally less happy than when we are focused and present, even if the task we are focused on is not particularly exciting.
Wow, nearly half of our waking hours. That really puts things in perspective. So when we talk about not wasting your life, we're not just talking about big decisions, like choosing the right career or moving to the right city. We're also talking about something much smaller and much more immediate, which is where your attention is going right now, in this very moment.
Exactly. And this brings us to what I think is one of the most important concepts in this entire conversation, which is that time is the only truly non-renewable resource we have. Think about other resources in your life. If you spend money, you can earn more. If you use your energy, you can sleep and recover it. If you lose a friendship, it's difficult, but sometimes friendships can be rebuilt or replaced. But time, once a minute passes, it's gone forever. You cannot buy it back, you cannot earn it back, and you cannot borrow it from tomorrow.
That is a deeply sobering thought. I remember reading somewhere that if you're 25 years old, you've lived approximately 9,000 days, and the average human lifespan, depending on where you live, gives you somewhere between 25,000 and 30,000 days total. So at 25, you have potentially already used a third of your entire supply of days.
That statistic is both frightening and motivating at the same time, is it not? And I want to be very clear here. The goal of thinking about our limited time is not to create anxiety or panic. It's not to make you feel like every single moment must be productive or optimized in some extreme way. Rather, the goal is to generate what I like to call a beautiful sense of urgency, an urgency that comes not from fear, but from a deep appreciation for what you have. When you truly understand that your time is limited and irreplaceable, you begin to make different choices. You begin to say no to things that do not serve you, and yes to the things that genuinely matter.
I love that phrase, a beautiful sense of urgency, because urgency can feel stressful, but when it comes from appreciation rather than fear, it feels more like motivation. It feels like a gentle push in the right direction rather than a loud alarm going off in your head.
Perfectly said. And that leads us beautifully into our next area of discussion, which is what I call the distraction trap. Because even if a person intellectually understands that time is precious, the world we live in today is specifically and almost deliberately designed to steal that time away from us without us even noticing.
Oh, this is something I feel very personally. I think the biggest distraction in my life, and probably in the lives of most people who are listening to us right now, is my smartphone. I pick it up to check one thing, maybe a message or a quick piece of news, and then somehow 30 minutes have disappeared. I look up and I genuinely cannot account for where that time went. I wasn't resting, I wasn't learning, I wasn't connecting meaningfully with anyone. I was just scrolling, almost in a kind of trance.
Yes, and this is not an accident. The apps and platforms on our phones are designed by some of the most brilliant engineers and psychologists in the world, and their primary job is to keep you engaged for as long as possible. Every notification, every colorful icon, every recommended for you video is a carefully engineered hook designed to capture your attention and hold it. The term that researchers use is the attention economy. Your attention is literally a product that is being bought and sold. Companies make money based on how many minutes of your day they can capture. So when you open a social media app and lose an hour, someone, somewhere, has made money from that hour. Your time became their profit.
When you put it that way, it sounds almost like a kind of theft, like our attention is being taken from us and we're not even aware of it while it's happening.
It really is a kind of slow, invisible theft. And the tragedy is that we often feel entertained in the moment, so we don't realize the cost until much later. Studies have shown that excessive social media use is linked to lower feelings of satisfaction, increased anxiety, reduced ability to concentrate, and a general sense that your own life is somehow not good enough when you compare it to the highlight reels of others. So you pay with your time, and then you pay with your well-being. It's a very bad transaction.
So what can we actually do about it? Because I know that telling people to just put your phone down is much easier said than done. The pull of those notifications and videos is genuinely very strong. I've tried to simply use willpower to resist it, and willpower alone has never been enough for me.
And that's a very honest and important admission, Abel. Willpower is a limited resource. Research by psychologist Roy Baumeister showed that willpower depletes over the course of a day, much like a muscle that gets tired. So relying on willpower alone to fight against something as powerful and persistent as a smartphone app is a losing battle. Instead, what works much better is what behavioral scientists call designing your environment. Instead of relying on your own strength to resist a temptation, you change your environment so that the temptation is less available in the first place.
Can you give some examples of what that looks like practically?
Absolutely. One of the simplest and most effective things you can do is to remove social media apps from the first screen of your phone, the screen you see the moment you open it. Put them on a secondary screen, inside a folder, or better yet, delete the apps entirely and only check those platforms on a desktop computer. This single change creates a small amount of friction, a tiny extra step between you and the distraction, and that small friction is often enough to break the automatic, unconscious habit of checking.
I actually tried something like this a few months ago. I deleted the short video app I was using the most, and for the first 3 or 4 days, I genuinely felt uncomfortable. I would reach for my phone and then realize there was nothing to automatically scroll through, and I didn't quite know what to do with myself. But after a week, something interesting started to happen. I found myself doing other things with those small pockets of time. I started reading again. I started taking short walks. I started having longer, more meaningful conversations with my family.
That experience you just described is so beautiful and so instructive. Those feelings of discomfort in the first few days are completely normal. They are actually a sign of withdrawal, similar in some ways to breaking any habit. Your brain has become accustomed to a constant stream of stimulation, and when you remove it, there is a period of adjustment. But on the other side of that discomfort is something wonderful, which is the rediscovery of what it feels like to be bored in a healthy way, to have a quiet moment and actually be present in it.
Healthy boredom. That is a concept I would not have understood a year ago. I used to think boredom was the enemy, something to be immediately solved with entertainment. But now I understand that some of the best ideas, some of the deepest conversations, some of the most important self-reflection happens in moments of quiet when we are not being stimulated from the outside.
Creativity, in particular, thrives in boredom. Many famous artists, writers, and thinkers have spoken about this. When your mind is not occupied with external input, it begins to wander inward, to make unexpected connections, to ask questions, to imagine possibilities. This is why so many people say they have their best ideas in the shower, on a walk, or just before falling asleep. These are the moments when external stimulation is low and the internal mind is allowed to move freely.
This connects so deeply to the next thing I wanted to explore with you, Anna, which is the difference between simply existing and actually living with intention. Because I think for a long time I was existing, going through the motions of a day without really choosing any of it. Wake up, check phone, work, eat, watch something, sleep, repeat.
And that pattern is so deeply familiar to so many people. It is what I call the automatic life, where the days run you rather than you running the days. And there is nothing inherently wrong with routine. Routine can be a beautiful and stabilizing force. The key difference is whether you have chosen your routine deliberately or whether you have simply fallen into it by default without ever questioning whether it reflects your actual values, your actual goals, or what you actually want your one life to look like.
So intentional living is really about conscious choice. Asking yourself, is what I'm doing right now something I have actively chosen, or is it just happening to me because it is the path of least resistance?
Precisely. And this question, is this something I have chosen or is it just happening to me, is one of the most powerful questions a person can ask themselves on a regular basis. I try to ask it about my schedule, about my relationships, about the content I consume, about the food I eat, about the way I spend my weekends, not in an obsessive or anxious way, but in a gentle, curious, reflective way, like a gardener who regularly walks through the garden to see what is growing well and what might need to be pulled out.
I love that metaphor. Your life is a garden that requires regular, conscious tending. And I suppose neglected gardens do not stay empty. They fill up with weeds. In the same way, a life that you are not actively tending will fill up with whatever is most convenient, most immediately pleasurable, and most effortless, which is rarely what is most meaningful.
That is an absolutely beautiful and accurate observation. Nature abhors a vacuum. If you do not fill your time with intention, something else will fill it for you, and that something else is usually a distraction. Which brings us to perhaps the most practical part of our conversation today, and that is the challenge of procrastination and how to overcome it.
Oh, procrastination, my oldest and most stubborn companion. I know intellectually that I should do the hard thing first. I know it. And yet, when the morning comes and the hard thing is sitting there waiting for me, I find 100 small, seemingly reasonable tasks to do instead. I'll clean my desk. I'll make another cup of coffee. I'll organize my email inbox. All legitimate activities, perhaps, but all used as very sophisticated avoidance strategies.
What you are describing is called productive procrastination, which is when we fill our time with smaller, easier tasks in order to feel busy and useful while avoiding the one big thing that actually matters most. And it is one of the most common and most cleverly disguised forms of self-sabotage. You can spend an entire day being busy and still end the day feeling hollow because the one thing that would have moved your life meaningfully forward did not get done.
So, how do we break through that? Because the hard thing is usually hard for a specific reason. It might be challenging or uncertain or emotionally uncomfortable. What is the strategy for actually starting?
There is a principle that I think is enormously helpful, and it is sometimes called eating the frog. The idea comes from a quote often attributed to Mark Twain, who said that if the first thing you do each morning is eat a live frog, you can go through the rest of the day knowing the worst thing is already behind you. The frog represents your most difficult, most avoided task, and the wisdom is simple but powerful. Do your hardest thing first, before you check your messages, before you scroll through anything, before you do anything comfortable and easy. Just begin.
That sounds terrifying and liberating at the same time. Terrifying because the frog is sitting right there waiting for you the moment you wake up, but liberating because once it is done, there is this incredible sense of relief and accomplishment that carries you through the entire rest of the day with more energy and more confidence.
Exactly. And the mental load of carrying an avoided task is far heavier than actually doing the task. Think about how much mental energy goes into avoiding something. The guilt, the low-level anxiety, the constant awareness at the back of your mind that this thing is still undone. When you finally just do it, all of that weight disappears instantly. You not only complete the task, you also reclaim all of that mental energy that was being spent on avoidance.
I experienced this so clearly when I was studying for a very difficult English language exam. I kept avoiding the grammar section because I found it the most challenging and the most frustrating. I would study vocabulary, which I enjoyed, or I would practice listening, which was easier for me. But the grammar just sat there, untouched and growing more intimidating in my imagination. When I finally forced myself to spend the first hour of every study session on grammar, something amazing happened. Not only did my grammar improve dramatically, but I also started enjoying my other study sessions more because I was not carrying the guilt of the unaddressed weakness.
That is a perfect example, and it connects beautifully to something I want to spend some time on now, which is the idea of learning as an investment. The choice to learn something, particularly something as valuable and universal as the English language, is one of the most powerful and meaningful ways a person can spend their time. It is the opposite of wasted time.
I think about this a lot. When I started learning English seriously, I had to make real sacrifices. I had to give up some leisure time, some social activities, some comfort, and there were moments when I wondered if it was worth it. But now, several years later, I can see the compounding return on that investment in a way that is genuinely astonishing. Doors have opened that I could not have even imagined before. I can access information, ideas, opportunities, and communities that were simply not available to me when I only spoke one language.
And this is the nature of skill investment. The return is rarely immediate. In fact, in the early stages of learning any significant skill, the return feels almost non-existent. You put in enormous effort and seem to make very little visible progress, but underneath the surface, something powerful is being built, like the foundation of a building that is invisible from the street, but is what makes everything above ground possible.
I heard a phrase once that I found very striking. Someone said that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. And I think about learning English in exactly that way. Maybe some of our listeners are thinking, I wish I had started earlier. And the answer to that is yes, perhaps, but the most important thing now is that you start today, or you continue today, because 20 years from now, you will be so grateful that you did not wait any longer.
That is one of the most important messages we can offer today, and I want to stay with it for a moment because I think it deserves real emphasis. The willingness to invest in yourself, in your knowledge, in your skills, in your mind, is a declaration that you believe your future is worth working for. It is one of the most profound acts of self-respect. And every hour you spend learning, every episode of a podcast like this one that you listen to carefully and intentionally, is a small but real act of building a better version of your future self.
And I think that investment also protects against one of the deepest regrets people feel at the end of their lives. Studies of people who are very elderly and reflecting on their lives have consistently shown that people do not regret the things they did as much as they regret the things they did not do. The conversations they did not have, the skills they did not develop, the risks they did not take, the time they did not invest in growth.
The research on this is very consistent and very moving.
Dr. Carl Palimer, a sociologist at Cornell University, spent years interviewing over 1,000 elderly Americans about the lessons they wished they could pass on to younger generations. And one of the most repeated themes was urgency, not in a stressful sense, but in the sense that they wished they had understood sooner how quickly life passes and how important it is to be deliberate with your time rather than assuming that you will figure things out later when you have more time or more money or more courage.
And later is such a dangerous word, is it not? I will start exercising later. I will learn that language later. I will tell the people I love that I love them later. I will pursue that dream later. But later has a way of becoming never, very quietly and very gradually, without us even making a conscious decision to give up.
Later is one of the most expensive words in any language, and yet we use it so casually, as if later is a real and guaranteed place we will eventually arrive at. The truth is that every single later that becomes a now is the result of a previous decision to start, and every later that never becomes a now is the result of waiting for conditions that were never going to be perfect.
I want to shift slightly to something that I think is easy to overlook in conversations about living intentionally and not wasting time, and that is the role of small joys. Because I think intentional living can sometimes start to feel very serious and very goal-oriented, like life is a series of tasks to be optimized. But I do not think that's the whole picture.
You are so right to raise this, Abel, and I'm glad you did, because a life lived only in pursuit of goals and productivity is also a kind of poverty. The beauty of a truly intentional life is not just in the big achievements, the completed degrees, the developed skills, the career milestones. It's equally in the small, daily moments of genuine pleasure and connection. The cup of tea you actually taste instead of drink while staring at a screen. The walk where you notice the light changing on the leaves. The conversation with a friend where both of you feel truly heard. These small moments are not breaks from a meaningful life. They are some of the most meaningful parts of it.
I think about my grandmother, actually. She never had a particularly impressive career by any conventional measure. She never had great wealth or public recognition, but she was one of the most intentional and fully alive people I have ever known. She paid attention to everything. She noticed things. She was genuinely present in every conversation she had, and when she cooked a meal, she cooked it like it mattered, because to her, it did. Every meal was an act of love and attention.
What a beautiful description. And what you are describing about your grandmother touches on the final theme I want us to explore today, which is legacy. Not in the sense of fame or monuments, but in the much more personal and intimate sense of what we leave behind in the lives of the people who knew us. The question of legacy is really a question of values. What did you stand for? What did you love? How did you make people feel? What did you teach even without meaning to, simply by the example of how you lived?
That is a question that I think genuinely changes the way you spend your time when you sit with it seriously. If I imagine someone who loves me, maybe a child or a friend, describing me after I am gone, what would I want them to say? That I was always available to scroll through videos? Or that I was present, engaged, curious, kind, and constantly growing?
And that vision, that imagined legacy, can serve as a kind of compass. On days when you are tempted to fall back into passive, distracted, automatic living, you can return to that question. Is what I am doing right now consistent with the person I want to be remembered as? Not in a harsh or judgmental way, but in a guiding, gentle, clarifying way.
I think the most important insight I have personally taken from everything we have discussed today is that not wasting your life does not require dramatic, sweeping changes all at once. It is a series of small, daily, deliberate choices. Putting the phone down, starting the hard task first, spending 30 minutes learning something, having a real conversation, noticing a moment of beauty. Each of those choices, made day after day, accumulates into an entirely different kind of life.
Absolutely and powerfully said. Small choices compounded over time are the architecture of a life. And the wonderful news is that it is never too late to begin making better choices. Every single day is a new beginning, a fresh opportunity to align your actions with your values, to spend your time on what truly matters, and to build, brick by brick, the life that you actually want to be living.
If I had to summarize everything we have talked about today in a single thought, I would say this. Intentional action is the only real antidote to regret. Because regret is what happens when we look back and realize that we were present for our own life, but not actually living it. Intentionality is what closes that gap between existing and truly living.
And I would add that the most profound act of courage available to any person in any language, in any culture, at any age, is to look at this one life you've been given and to decide fully and deliberately that you will not sleepwalk through it, that you will wake up, pay attention, invest deeply, love fully, and make every day count for something real and lasting.